Do you guys remember back in the day, back when there was only one Resident Evil remake to worry about, and we didn't even need to worry about it because it turned out to be the best video game remake ever made? Well, back then, no one even questioned if it was considered canon or not. It just was, from day one. Jill was hotter, jigglier, and it was an all-around masterpiece that was crafted with nothing but respect to the already existing lore. Nothing of real value in the series' timeline was destroyed by this or erased. And yeah, I know they retconned Bravo Team showing up a day earlier in Resident Evil 0, but that didn't really negatively impact anything. In fact, the pairing of these two titles only strengthened the series' lore, setting up the stage for Africa with the progenital virus, giving Albert Wesker real motives and direction, all while introducing us to Umbrella's founders, the three best friends that anyone could have. But then, the other remakes came out, full of blatant in-your-face retcons, as if Nelson Mandela wasn't even trying to be sneaky anymore. Toasty! Entire fan-favorite locations were either erased from history or renamed entirely by retcons that couldn't even work with the previous remake's retcon of adding this door here. The train platform to the underground lab was now erased from history. This historical landmark, a single location that had ties to 4 Resident Evil titles, RE0, RE2, Umbrella Chronicles, and Outbreak. And don't even get me started on the inconsistencies found within Resident Evil 2's remake. To cover that, we'd be here all day, and you already know what I'm talking about. The lazy game design and storytelling that has you questioning if you're being pursued by more than one Mr. X, and wondering if Annette Birkin has a twin. Seriously, what is even going on here? There are conflicting events happening all over the place within this game, so much so that Capcom had to release an official statement explaining that if the player plays as Leon, then none of Claire's scenario happens, and vice versa. A cheap excuse for being lazy that makes it sound like the double slit experiment, if the slits were getting DP'd. Double photon. So don't ask questions, you just don't understand quantum physics. Anyway, Capcom has since resorted to calling Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3's remakes as reimaginings. And honestly, as much as I love and enjoy playing Resident Evil 2's remake, I think it might have been a far lazier production than RE3's remake. Not only did they cut locations, enemies, and change scenarios so that they wouldn't make any sense, they even lied to our faces about providing second-run B scenarios that were really just different approaches to the RPD and nothing more. Add all of this up, and you have far more cut content than Resident Evil 3's remake. Anyway, I was satisfied with Capcom basically admitting these were fanfiction retellings. Nemesis didn't actually go around spawning tongue-punching fart boxes, Jill's foul mouth didn't canonically deep-throat this spider dick, and Ada never actually got the shaft. And I was fine with this. If Capcom wanted to keep making bad remakes, so be it, just as long as they'd never be accepted as canon. But they couldn't even do that right.
This time, it can be different. It has to.
Yeah, they went ahead and made an amazing remake, the second best remake in the series if you ask me. Resident Evil 4. Not only is it visually and mechanically better, but it's also a million times better narratively. Like the original remake, it expands on the lore, filling in the gaps, and establishing links to other titles and events. And this is where the real problem lies. Should the Resident Evil 4 remake, that cuts out all the silly dumb shit from the original, be accepted as canon in the official timeline? I would so love for this stupid giant robot midget chase sequence to be erased from history, as well as this laser hall with all the QTEs. I want to forget that any of these pointless documents and files ever existed. Seriously, nothing of value would be lost. They only ever state the obvious and report on events that literally just happened to the player 2 seconds ago. To me, the original was never a real Resident Evil game because it made zero effort towards being a Resident Evil game. And the fact that this was almost a Resident Evil 4 game proves my point.
6 years have passed since that horrendous incident. 1998. I'll never forget it.
With this remake, I feel like this story and the game belong in the series. But what could the consequences be if we were to allow Capcom to replace RE4's canon? what damage would be done to the official timeline. And you know they want to replace the originals, that's why they've stopped distributing them. You're going to have to pay $70 from now on to experience the SparkNotes versions of the classics, and it's only a matter of time before the OG RE4 is pulled from the digital stores.
Got a selection of good things on sale, stranger. Out of stock, mate. All sold out, stranger. Can't sell what I don't have.
So what can we expect from this? For starters, you have to retroactively accept the events of 2 and 3's remakes. Jill would be that foul-mouthed girl boss who hid in her apartment while all her friends and ex-coworkers died outside. And Nemesis would have been that complete failure who couldn't even kill the most pathetic member of STARS. And none of the events of Resident Evil 2 would make any sense, but nothing compares to the changes that Resident Evil 4 would bring. Massive plot holes and inconsistencies creating universe-shattering paradoxes that would erase entire events from the past and future. But before we get into the details of all that, if you're enjoying this video and you've made it this far, please click that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I post Resident Evil content regularly. Also, a quick shout out to my RE4Ls. Thank you guys for supporting the channel. If anyone else out there would like to show their support and become a member, the Patreon link's in the description below. Now that that's out of the way, I want to start by addressing some quick retcons that don't really make or break the games. Starting with Sadler's staff. This control staff is no longer a sentient-like object with a parasite attached to it. These hentai tentacles, they now just come out of him to wax that pole. Also, Luis appears to have been surgically operated on to get that plaga out of him, whereas in the original, he got help from Ada's connections in removing that egg before it was hatched by using medicine. And now, Luis's first line isn't just some joke, it's actually a code. Asking for a smoke is confirmation for both parties trying to smuggle out the amber and secure Luis's escape.
That hurts, you know?
Seemed like you really wanted to talk.
How observant, senor. Now, say, you got a smoke?
You know, those things will kill you.
Oh, well, maybe just untie me then, huh? Hey, got a smoke?
I do. The kind you like. Now where's the amber?
And speaking of the amber, it turns out my theory about the sample being more than just a control plaga was right. Something I knew a better writing team would have also noticed and corrected. So now they've clarified that the sample is more powerful than Sadler's plaga, and not just another control plaga. Oh yeah, and apparently Verdugo is now a woman, and the U in U3 no longer means Ultimate 3. Anyway, I could go on all day, but this video is about the major retcons that impact other titles, so I won't get into the petty name changes, flipped locations, and cut content. Let's just start with the most obvious retcon that everyone's been talking about, Operation Javier.
You're even more naive than I thought. You can't save her. You can't save anyone.
Give it up, Krauser. Being a lackey for these maniacs won't bring your men back.
Originally, Operation Javier was the mission where Leon was first introduced to Hunnigan and Jack Krauser. Krauser at the time was a mercenary hired by the US government to help carry out this covert op in South America. The mission was to investigate a drug cartel and their illegal black market dealings with bioweapons. And this is where Krauser first discovered the true power of BOWs when he was faced against the T. Veronica virus. After this, Krauser sought out Albert Wesker in hopes to obtain that power, so he faked his death in 2002, immediately after the mission. But now, in the remake, Krauser has been retconned as Leon's commanding officer, Major Krauser, of the US government, a special ops leader who trained his men for Operation Javier, a mission that was years in the making. And many fans now speculate that this new Leon had nothing to do with Operation OJ because of this file claiming that Krauser was the sole survivor of the mission, a retcon that would wipe out an entire game's events from existence if true. But I don't buy this, seeing as Krauser says, killing Leon would put an end to everything that happened in the jungle 2 years ago. This makes it seem like Leon was in fact there, maybe not as a member of the elite special unit at the time, but maybe he was there as just a BBW advisor, not technically on the team. And as for his fake death, that has been completely removed seeing how he was reported as the sole survivor, and he seems to have taken part directly in Ashley's abduction on her security detail, so I'm assuming he didn't fake his death and seek out Wesker. But now, my biggest issue with these two files about Krauser isn't with the possible deletion of what might be the worst Resident Evil game ever made. No, my issue is with this classified document claiming that Operation Javier was botched thanks to the previous president's administration making a bad call, suggesting that President Graham wasn't president in 2002. This statement alone squeezes in another unnamed US president into the Resident Evil timeline that doesn't have any more room for presidents. And whoever this unnamed president was clearly no longer in office by the fall of 2004, when they should have left office in January 2005. Meaning, these President Evil election cycles are now off track with realities. Or, President Graham was the vice president to the single worst president in US history, a president who botched Operation Javier and then walked out on the American people after 9/11. And yeah, I checked, 9/11 is a thing in the Resident Evil universe, along with Breaking Bad. And I know for a fact that Resident Evil's election cycles mirror our own election cycles because of the newspaper clipping Claire found in Resident Evil Infinite Darkness, an article that covers the US's withdrawal from Panam Stan, and this happened in October of 2000, published a month before the election, confirming that our elections are the same, and even talks about the effects Panam Stan will have for the president's re-election. And this president would be the vice president who took over for the president who resigned after the Raccoon City incident in 1998. And on a side note, I just want to point this out. How relieved do you think this president was that 100,000 Americans dying dominated the news cycle in the fall of '98, distracting the public from a certain cum stain on a dress? Anyway, they've never actually numbered these presidents, so it's unknown if Graham is the 44th or 45th president, so I guess there's some wiggle room in the timeline. But it's already been widely accepted that President Graham won the presidency in 2000 and went on to serve 2 terms, but in order for this to work now, he'd have to have been VP to the failed president and then win the election in 2004. And there's no doubt that Graham wouldn't win the re-election in 2008. Especially after making peace with Panam Stan, avoiding war with China, as well as working with the UN to facilitate the creation of the BSAA North American branch. But now, there's just no way for him to serve out 2 terms, because Damnation already declared this unnamed guy as president from 2008 to 2011. Yeah, another president who had to have died or resigned to make room for Adam Benford to serve as president in RE6. And I love this. Benford goes on to die in 2013, thanks to Leon, making him the 4th president in a row to not serve out 2 terms, and making him the 4th vice president in 15 years to be sworn in as president. Dude, at this point, nobody should be running for president. And moving on, another retcon that was overlooked by many people was the fact that the parasites now die as soon as they're disconnected from the hive mind control parasite, which doesn't really make any sense. Like, what are their limitations now? Is there a limited range that they can't travel past, or they just fall over dead? Like, what if they go into a walk-in freezer or a lead-lined room? Do they lose reception to the leader? Or what about these mines? This isn't magic we're dealing with here. Everyone down here should be dropping like flies. In the original RE4, they were controlled using sound waves emitted from organs within the parasites. And I don't think sound's getting down here. And with these new changes, there really shouldn't be any surviving members of the Los Illuminados going on to sell the Las Plagas sample to Glenn Arias so he could create the A virus in Vendetta. Because remember, he mixed the Plaga and T virus together. This retcon could also have an effect on Maria and her role in Death Island. So that's 2 possible future events that could be erased from history. But I think the biggest and wildest retcon that has everyone excited is Luis's new backstory with ties to Umbrella's Europe 6 Dream Team, the team responsible for creating Nemesis. For years, fans have theorized that Nemesis's NE alpha type synthetic parasite was inspired by Las Plagas parasites, but there was never an official link between the two. Until now, and fans are going crazy at the idea, speculating that Luis Sera was the one who introduced Umbrella to the parasites, for use in Tyrants. But, as awesome as all this sounds, it's just not possible. Yeah, sorry to burst everyone's bubble, but Luis was only 10 years old when the Nemesis project launched back in 1988. And this is when they started experimenting on chip parasites as ways to control Tyrants. So, unfortunately, with this age gap, Luis is not the missing link between Las Plagas and Nemesis. He was not the inspiration for using synthetic parasites in Tyrants. And according to the game, a 3-year-old Luis Sera ran away from home shortly after this photo was taken in 1981, right after his grandfather was attacked by an infected wolf, and the infection didn't get any better. So his grandfather asked Mendez to burn down their family home with him inside of it and to raise Luis, who ran away the next day. This explains why Mendez now has Luis's personal belongings up in his attic, but it doesn't explain how a 3 or 4-year-old boy who ran away from home became one of Umbrella's star researchers. Luis would have had to have been a child prodigy, like Alexia or something, to have risen the ranks to Umbrella's Dream Team Europe 6. And if this was the case, then Hunnigan's intel would have reported on something like this. But no, he just graduated from college and started working for Umbrella, meaning, realistically, he'd have like 2 years with Umbrella before the Raccoon City incident happened in 1998. But I'd love it if a 10-year-old Luis Sera really did introduce the synthetic NE-alpha parasite concept to Umbrella. This would mean that almost every horrific and terrible event from 1998 on could be traced back to him, since his parasite was used in combination with the progenitor virus on Lisa Trevor, meaning he'd be indirectly responsible for the creation of the G-virus, as well as all of the blood from every experimented and tortured orphan would be on his hands, from the G-virus orphan experiments to the children on Sheena Island. And remember, on Sheena Island, they needed beta-hetero-non-serotonin, which can only be extracted from young orphans' brains while they're being tortured to death. You know, that shit the Queen of England had finally run out of. Luis would now be responsible for these atrocities, on top of helping out the Los Illuminados and introducing Las Plagas to Albert Wesker's people. And another deep retcon I noticed was Ada's blatant betrayal to Wesker, which was a dumb move, seeing how he was watching her from satellites. In the original, she quietly gave Wesker the old switcheroo with a base Plaga sample, giving her enough time to get paid and get away. But now, she's revealed her hand immediately, which is something I just blame Lily Gao for. Even Wesker doesn't respect this Ada. He's got her name as Ada Wang on his monitor. Also, I think I found a connection that might explain how Wesker obtains a decent Las Plagas sample this time around, especially if he wasn't working with Krauser anymore, and that link is through this researcher named Ryan Chen, a researcher from another facility, questioning the lead Las Plagas researcher, Annabel Garcia Escudero. Like, could this be the same Ryan who helped create Type 2 and Type 3 Plagas that were found in Resident Evil 5? In both documents, both Ryans joke about drinking and working around Las Plagas, and don't forget it was Annabelle who came up with the superior species of Las Plagas, which claimed to be more powerful than Sadler's Plaga, so maybe this is where Ryan learned about the secrets of creating advanced Plaga types. Anyway, those are all the major retcons I picked up on that could spiral out of control and butterfly effect up the series if we allow these remakes to become canon. A bloated political timeline, the possible deletion of entire games and events, the missing link to Nemesis thanks to a child genius who would rival Alexia and Birkin, but somehow no one's ever heard of him, as well as new links to Resident Evil 5's Magini. And as fun as these games are, I fear it's only going to get worse from here.
This time, it can be different. It has to.
But that's it. If you guys are interested in more in-depth videos into the political history of Resident Evil, or would like me to cover Luis's new origins and tragedy in detail, let me know down in the comments and I'll get started on one. Also, were there any significant retcons that I forgot to mention or didn't even notice? I didn't cover a lot of the little ones, like how the merchant is now a they-them, and how it was actually Salazar's mother who was now responsible for releasing Las Plagas on the world. Anyway, let me know in the comments, and please check out my Patreon page to become a member of the RE4L. I'd like to welcome Brandon Lima and Bloss the Sauce. Thank you guys for your support, and thanks everyone else. Thanks, bye.